Wondering what the F has happened to your body and your life? You're in the right place, my friend. Welcome to Season 3 of Transforming 45, where we dive into the incredible stories of how brilliant humans are navigating the midlife squeeze with courage, passion, and a healthy dose of humor. Don't miss out on any of our heart-led episodes. Hit the subscribe button, leave a 5-star review, and if you're inspired, share an episode you love with a friend. It means more to me than I can express that you're choosing to spend time here and sharing our message of midlife revolution. So let's get into it. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Transforming 45. This week, I'm really excited to have this conversation with someone who is a colleague in this work that we are doing. I'm thrilled to welcome Theresa Lovelin. With nearly 2 decades of nursing experience spanning hospital settings in the United States and international schools across Korea and Hong Kong, this registered nurse brings a unique global perspective to the challenges of perimenopause and menopause. Her journey began with unexplained palpitations, leading to years of misdiagnosis and frustration. It was only after encountering a menopause specialist that she finally found her answers and relief. Fueled by her own experience and the realization that countless women suffer needlessly, she became a passionate advocate. She empowers women to understand and navigate the significant life transition through extensive research and sharing her knowledge with others. Theresa's love for travel has taken her to 5 continents and 25 countries, and she now lives happily with her husband and 2 daughters in Indonesia. What a fascinating story. I cannot wait to get into it with you. And I know there are so many intersections in your stories and the women that we work and that we serve. So welcome to the show, Theresa. I'm so glad that you're here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel really honored and blessed.
Great. All right. So let's start at the beginning. So who are you and how did life introduce you to this version?
Well, you kind of summarized it pretty well in my bio, but just to go a little bit more in depth, I am a registered nurse from the US, trained in the US, and I worked there for about 10 years before we moved international. My family moved international. And then I did some volunteer time as a nurse in Korea. I could actually not work in Korea because I would have to take the boards in Korean, which I am not fluent in. So I volunteered my services through the international school. And then we moved to Hong Kong, where I was able to work for an international school as a school nurse. And really, none of that has to do with the menopause, other than the fact that I personally started having symptoms. And my symptoms began with palpitations. I did not know it at the time that that was a symptom of menopause. And I was about 40 years old. I had a little bit of a suspicion only because my mom was 42 when she was done. She was finished. She was menopausal. So just knowing that in the back of my mind, I started researching could this possibly be perimenopause or menopause? I actually didn't know it was what perimenopause was. And I went to a fantastic nursing school in the US, but we didn't learn about menopause in great depth or detail, which turns out is extremely common across all healthcare fields, sadly.
Absolutely. Yeah, I actually was going to ask you,
Yes.
what did you learn in your own training, sort of anticipating what the answer would be? But yeah.
Just other than your period stops. That's all that I remember. But I don't recall going into any sort of depth about what maybe hot flashes, but other than that, no symptoms. Like I don't remember that from nursing school. Yeah. So, and there's a lot of symptoms. We can talk about that later. So yeah, I started researching, and at the time, this was about 5 or 6 years ago now, the only thing that came up about palpitations in relation to menopause was Oprah Winfrey. And she had palpitations, but suffered with them for 5 years. And that woman is incredible. She has all kinds of resources. And it took her that long for them to diagnose her. And then they started her on HRT, and her palpitations went away. And I immediately thought, okay, well, I can't have HRT. That's super dangerous. I'm of the generation, I remember very clearly when the WHI study came out and it was blasted all over the news. And so, it put the fear of God into practitioners and women, and that there were these incredible risks. And so I felt like oh my gosh, I have no idea what to do. I don't know what my options are. So anyway, fast forward, I was actually about to go on a trip to Uganda when I started having the palpitations. They were quite mild, and I didn't tell anybody, which is the wrong thing to do. But anyway, I went.
But that's what we do.
That's what we do. Try to justify and make things happen, which is what I did. And when I went to Uganda, I out of the blue had my period, and I was ill prepared. Thankfully, I was able to get supplies, but I was totally caught off guard. Fast forward to the summer of 2019, which was about 5 or 6 months later, we were in Italy, and I had palpitations quite severe and also accompanied with anxiety. I went to a local clinic. Thankfully, the doctor spoke English. He took my vital signs, which were normal. And then he asked me a question. So, are you on your period or about to be on your period? And I said, well, gosh, I'm about to be actually. So that clued me in a little bit more like, I don't know. And then, what he told me? This is very normal. And I said, well, it's not normal for me. I've never experienced this before. And he said, no, it's normal. And so I thought, okay, well, it's really hot. Maybe I'm a little dehydrated. I'll go get some electrolyte salts and hopefully that helps. And then carried on as we do. And then over the course of years, I had more and more and more symptoms. And I would go to my doctor. She would refer me. I saw several specialists. Nobody ever mentioned the word menopause or perimenopause. I demanded that my labs be checked, which all, of course, came back normal, with the exception
Uh-huh.
of vitamin D. I did have some low vitamin D, which, looking back and knowing what I know now, is quite normal for vitamin D to be low in the beginning stages. So I continued my research, my in-depth, just trying to find what I could, anything to learn about. Not anything. I mean, I was following with my background. I was trying to follow the evidence. And then ironically, a woman that lived in my building when we were in Hong Kong was a GP, is a GP out of the UK, and she's a menopause expert. Which, by the way, I had no idea what a menopause expert was. I was like, is that even a real thing? I got to look that up. Lo and behold, and she was giving a free talk in our complex. And so I attended that talk. It was about an hour. And I remember sitting there with a room full of women feeling incredibly validated and relieved. And just, I was like, where was this woman 3 years ago? Because all of the things that I had been reading about and experiencing with the doctors, she just validated and made sure, like she answered all these questions. And then I was angry. And then a fire was lit under me because with my medical background, I'm sitting amongst these peers that don't necessarily have that same background. And I thought, gosh, what is this woman next to me going to do? How is she going to deal with this? And it inspired me and it lit a fire underneath me. And I just felt like I have got to do something. I have got to teach these women. I need to advocate. I need to teach them, to empower them so that they can go and advocate for themselves. And that is really where my business, Magnolia Collective Wellness, where it evolved from, is from that point. So
Uh-huh.
that's kind of how I ended up where I am today. And Magnolia is a lot bigger than that. We do a lot of things for our clients, but the whole purpose is around menopause and perimenopause and really supporting women through this journey so that they can go out and advocate for themselves.
Yeah, I feel like that's the heart of this work at this point, right? Is giving women the knowledge and the tools that they need to advocate. And
Yes.
there's some challenge and some frustration in that, right? At that when we are at this stage and there is already so much going on in our body, and then on top of that, we have to go and we have to advocate,
Yeah.
right?
It's a lot of energy. And also, not to mention the space in our life in which this is happening. So, a lot of women they're navigating so much, whether that's a career shift, in the, upward trend, they're taking on new roles, and on top of that, maybe they have children, or maybe they're taking care of elderly parents, or, fill in the blank. There's a lot going on. And then you add on top all of these different symptoms, and you don't you don't know what you don't know. And so, I mean, I thought I was dying,
Yeah.
so and thankfully I'm not, but I didn't know. And so it was very, very scary and, uncharted territory for me. And I just think about all these women and what they're trying to navigate.
Yeah, absolutely. That is definitely the truth. And when you were talking about heart palpitations, it reminded me of, so I had my first heart palpitations not long after my second son was born. So I had two babies in pretty close succession to each other, which was, it's challenging on the body.
Yeah.
And I had my first heart palpitations and it same, didn't tell anyone. I just was like, this is weird. I remember sitting in the chair holding Nate and going, heart keep beating. Like I have like actually having that feeling.
Mhm.
And then once I'd healed a little bit more, they became much more infrequent. But I started noticing that I would get them just before I was about like in between ovulation and the beginning of my period. I would have
Mhm.
heart palpitations in that time. And I had conversations with a couple of people that I was noticing this trend, and everyone said to me, "I've never heard of heart palpitations being
Mhm.
connected to like a
Mhm.
hormonal cycle." Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It you know
And
Sorry, go ahead.
no, I think it is a lot more common, but because that is the answer that we often are given, we just don't talk about it.
Yes. Yeah. There's so many things to unpack in what you just said. But I will tell you, the crazy thing is, just today, I was reviewing some research that came out about, and there's this fantastic graph that they included. And it's about how the women's menstrual cycle and the fluctuations of the hormones has a direct impact on our heart and our heart activity, not only the heart, but also the brain. So there's these different fluctuations in the sympathetic nervous system, I think is what it was, but it's a fantastic graph and shows you this correlation, which is extremely fascinating and can explain so much of what is actually going on physiologically. The other thing too is we have estrogen and progesterone and testosterone receptors all over our bodies, and they impact all of our body systems. And one of them happens to be on our sinoatrial node in our heart, estrogen particularly.
Uh,
So when you replace your estrogen with bioidentical, estradiol gel or estradiol, that's why a lot of women get the relief and they no longer have those palpitations, or they have less frequent or less severe. So this is the kind of stuff that needs to be shared. This is what we need to be talking about so that women don't feel so caught off guard and feel like they have to just slide it under the rug and keep on going. You don't have to suffer. There's no reason to suffer.
Absolutely. And that I think is something that is so important also that we need to talk about because I think when you and I were talking in our initial chat, I was saying I'd just been presenting at a session and a woman said to me, like essentially her question was, how bad does it have to be for me to be able to go and get support? And my heart breaks in those moments, right?
Yeah.
Because that is what we've been taught, right? That you push through
Yeah.
essentially until you can't anymore. And when
Yes.
you can't because you're in such a place of health deficit,
Yes.
that is when, okay, well, I'm really in rough shape now. So now I'm going to ask for help.
Now it's okay.
And
Now I have permission. I've
yes,
suffered enough and terribly enough. It's okay now.
yeah, exactly. And my response is the same, and it's don't suffer. You do not have to suffer. You have been through enough at this point in your life.
Yeah.
Not that we should ever have to suffer through any of it.
Mm,
And with our current, context, that is what we do.
yeah.
So don't suffer. When you are starting to notice that these symptoms are coming up for you,
Mhm.
take care of it right then and there
Yes.
because it takes so much more to come back from that deep hole than
Yes.
if we start from a place of my health is pretty well intact. These are
Yeah.
the things I'm noticing and I want to bring them back into alignment.
Yeah. Exactly. There's no like, here you need to suffer from 5 symptoms before you can go. There's no rule that says that. Or suffer for, even if it's just one, the severity has to go on for this time, or there's no rule out there. And not to mention the fact that there are about 15 to 20% of women who do not have symptoms. That said, like outwardly feeling symptoms. That said, there are other things that are happening inside our body that estrogen and progesterone and testosterone impact that are silent. Things like osteoporosis, things like estrogen and the impact it has on our circulatory system. So, our blood vessels and how elastic they are and how well and efficient they help pump. When we don't have those things, it decreases, which I think is one of the reasons why cardiovascular disease is the number one killer of women, above and
Yes.
beyond breast cancer. So if you feel a symptom, don't delay. Go and get the help and support that you need, and do it from a trusted, preferably menopause expert or somebody who is well versed in menopause, because they'll know the data
Mhm.
and evidence, and they'll be able to help walk you through risks and benefits and be able to help you make a shared decision in your health. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I do with women is if I know that they are like, so I am a consultant, I am a coach, I am not a healthcare practitioner. So
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
always make sure that that is very clear with folks I'm working with. But what I do is give you a plan, right?
Yes.
So I can give you all of the information. And I had a girlfriend just a couple of weeks ago. She was she went into very premature menopause, right? So
Mhm.
was completely done at 40, which is fairly early. And the research is showing us now that the earlier we go into full menopause, the more we really need to be caring for ourselves, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, because we have a longer period of time after where we don't have all of those protective effects of estrogen, progesterone, and
Yeah.
testosterone. No one
Exactly.
had ever told her that. So she's now 45, 46.
Mhm.
And now that I am in this work, we've been having lots of conversations. And she was like, well, but nobody ever told me that. I said, I know. And I'm so sorry that that's the experience. So she went to her doctor to have the HRT conversation. And she starts texting me from his office. She said, he is flabbergasted that I am here asking for these hormones
Wow.
and has no idea what to say to me. He's asking me about what kind of products I need.
Oh my
So
word.
she's texting me saying, what do I need to tell him?
Yeah.
And after the conversation, she was like, gosh, I really wish you had been with me in that appointment. It would have been so much easier.
Yeah.
So, going to someone who has some skill and expertise
Mhm.
prior to an appointment, if you are going to somebody, because we know that there are not a ton of menopause experts in the healthcare field at the moment.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
going to those people who have that skill, getting a plan, knowing what to say, knowing what to ask for can be really helpful. Otherwise, those appointments can feel very overwhelming.
Percent. And I've actually been in your shoes several times, with, trying to tell the person, like, these are the questions you asked. This is what you need to do. So much to unpack with with that situation too. So
Mhm.
in the US, there was a survey or study done. I think it was in 2019. It may have been earlier than that. Later than that. But really, end of the day, there's only about 7 to 10% of doctors that feel confident enough that they've had enough education where they can help support women in this stage of life. That's extremely low. And the reason why it's so low is because the Women's Health Initiative, that study that came out in 2002, and many of you, your viewers or listeners might know this by now, but for those who don't, when that study came out, um, what medical schools did in the US, they said, "Oh, okay, well now that there's no therapies, or there's no remedies for menopause, we're just not going to teach about it." And which still to me is incredible, because women still go through this phase. It's not like they don't not go through it, you know? So at the minimum, there should have been education about what women are experiencing and, the symptoms and all of the, the other things that go around it besides just the lifestyle choices. There's many lifestyle choice things that we could be doing to help remedy. So anyway, that's part of the huge frustration. That is slowly changing. Schools are starting to implement this curriculum. However, it's going to take a long time. It's going to take some time for us to catch up to having enough people that are capable and knowledgeable to provide this service to women. The other thing I would say about that too is women who go in to have an appointment, there's so many things that we can do ahead of time. There's people like you and I who help prepare our clients and provide them with the knowledge and the education, can provide a little bit of a plan. You and I cannot prescribe, but we can talk to you about risks and benefits about HRT, about the differences between the WHI study HRT and what we have available now, and the safety around that. So there's some things that we can definitely do to help prepare them, and that way they can go and advocate for themselves. Now, that said, when they go into the appointment and they're met with resistance or a doctor who just doesn't know how to deal with this, then it might be time to go and find a different provider if it's possible. So, because you really need to have somebody that is knowledgeable and willing. Some doctors are willing, they just don't know where to go. And so sometimes we can say, okay, here's some studies that you can share with the doctor and let them kind of get caught up to speed. But in the meantime, we don't want you to suffer if it's going to take too much time. So you might need to go out and seek another provider.
Yeah, absolutely. And having that information is so important because when we have those providers who aren't sure, another example of a recent conversation was person went to their physician, offered them either an antidepressant
Yeah.
or HRT.
Yeah.
Which but that practitioner said, "HRT causes cancer, or you can have this antidepressant, which has all of these other side effects." It was like a pick your poison kind of conversation
Yeah.
from the reflection I had with that person afterwards. And
Yeah.
so being really aware of what the truth
Yes.
is really important because
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, and the other and I'd love to hear what your thoughts around this as well. So the other piece of conversation that's been coming up quite regularly is people are given the choice of birth control.
Hmm.
Well, you can just go back on birth control.
Hmm.
So I'd love to hear your thoughts around that.
Yeah. So just to back up a little bit and talk about antidepressants versus HRT, the gold standard. So actually, let me even go back a little bit further. There was a recent study, I think it was completed last year, that came out last year. There's a 40% increased chance of women entering perimenopause that they will experience a mental health disorder of some kind or issue. So that could be depression, that could be anxiety, it could be new onset, or if you were somebody that had those symptoms or illnesses before or disorders before, it could get worse. So when you enter, and because of the fluctuations of the hormones, the gold standard treatment is not an SSRI or an antidepressant. It is, in fact, HRT if you turn out to be a candidate for, which most women are. So that's first and foremost to just let your audience know that. Then birth control is not the same as HRT. HRT is quite low dose and does not prevent pregnancy. So birth control is something that stops ovulation so that you won't get pregnant. And actually, this is a point of emphasis that we need to be careful with women who are continue to be sexually active, that they need to know that they still need to have some form of birth control if they do not want to get pregnant. Now, birth control can come in many forms, as in using protection in a condom or an IUD or actually birth control. So that's a very nuanced conversation with a provider who can help you navigate that, and it's very individualized.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And knowing the risks and benefits of both, again,
Yes.
really important.
Really important.
Yeah, but it's being offered even in some case to women who are fully menopausal, but
Yeah.
as a treatment for their
Yeah. Yeah. That's somebody that's a provider that I don't feel is well versed in HRT.
Mhm.
And I would encourage that person to have a more in-depth conversation, or like I said before, try to seek out somebody that is a menopause expert who can really help them dive into the risks and benefits and the differences between those two remedies.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I
Yeah.
want to go back to what you were saying about when HRT became no longer an option, thanks to the WHI study in the
Yeah.
early 2000s, that was taken out of medical school curriculums because we didn't have a pharmaceutical remedy, right?
Yeah.
But it is one part of the conversation.
Yep.
And there is so many other avenues in
Yeah.
which even if we choose menopause hormone therapy or HRT, that is one piece of the much larger puzzle.
Yeah. 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 100% could not agree more. The sort of the ideal situation is the marriage between HRT and what we call the five lifestyle factors or five pillars of health. If you can marry those two and you can do them really well, which most people can once they're given the tools and the knowledge, then it's optimal. It's optimal for not just longevity, but quality of longevity with your life. So the five pillars are, I'm sure you know, but sleep, nutrition, exercise, reducing toxins, and stress management. And there are specific things that women in this phase of life have to focus on with those five things and really prioritize. For women that choose to not use MHT or HRT or cannot use it for very specific health risks and reasons, then we like to say, okay, you need to double down on the five pillars and, to try to help optimize without being able to use the HRT. The
Mhm.
HRT does so much for us. There's a ton of prevention, in particular cardiovascular disease, diabetes, osteoporosis prevention, and neurological disorder prevention, things like Alzheimer's and dementia. So if you're in this window of opportunity for women within 10 years of menopause or under the age of 60, which still even that is nuanced. We
Mhm.
even if outside of that window, we can still do menopause hormone therapy or HRT. We just do it maybe a little more cautiously, and approach it definitely in a more cautious manner. And there's different ways that we can use HRT that have less side effects. But on the other side of things, those five pillars of health are huge and definitely can complement our longevity, quality of longevity. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We talk on the show a lot around those five pillars. And what are some of the strategies that you give women specifically around reducing toxins?
Reducing toxins? Yeah. So we know that the number one carcinogenic killer is obesity. Number two is smoking. And number three is alcohol. So anytime we can reduce any of those, we know with obesity, it's exercise and nutrition. Sleep also is an impact. Stress management. If your cortisol levels are continuously high, that's just going to cause inflammation, likely going to cause us to make, poor choices with nutrition, probably will impact our exercise and the choices we make there. So it all interplays, with each other. So first of all is reducing obesity. There's so much right now about GLP-1s and
Mhm.
assistance. I am not an expert in that at all. I have people I like to defer to for that, but we know that can be a tool. And then, of course, incorporating the exercise and nutrition, the positive sleep habits and hygiene, and then the stress management. With alcohol and smoking, you really have to try to decrease it. With alcohol, women metabolize it differently in this phase of life. We can't do it the way we used to. And so, because of that, if we drink, we get that 1 or 2 or 3 a.m. wake up call, and we can't go back to sleep. And then, of course, that impacts our sleep. So then we're making decisions based on poor sleep for that day. So when I'm talking with women, I tell them, listen, because often when I tell women, you got to reduce alcohol, according to the research, to little to none. And usually, if I'm in a presentation, there's a collective sigh.
Mm, I know, it's a tough one.
Sipping on their wine. I'm not very popular in that moment.
I know, it's a tricky one.
Yeah, but the thing is just what I tell them is you're making a choice. So if you choose to drink, you're going to choose to sacrifice your sleep that night. And so if you've got something really big and important the next day, that's probably not the time to be consuming. Or have just one drink and, try to hydrate. And anyway, it's hard. They also have to take ownership themselves. And then same with smoking. It can impact sleep and so many other body systems. Tons of research on that. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. And I approach alcohol consumption in the same way. It's like you just have to really know your body,
Yeah.
know how you're going to respond, and then you have to make the choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Red wine too is, I don't know what it is about it. And I am from Oregon and we have amazingly beautiful red wines. And
Mhm.
it's really hard for me, but for some reason, personally, it impacts me where I'll guarantee a wake up call too
Yeah.
early.
I have noticed the same thing recently and particularly with red. And same. It's one of like red is one of the great joys of my life.
Yes.
And yeah, and it's hard because there's also it's not just the alcohol, right? Like I do not drink wine to get drunk.
Yeah.
I like to have a glass of wine because of the ritual that comes around it, way it interplays with food, all of those things. So there's so much that is wrapped up in
There's
the
a lot.
rituals, yeah, that we experience around that can be really challenging.
Yeah, there's something social about it. There's something warm about, having a nice Pinot Noir
Mhm.
or whatever it is. And it does pair nicely with some delicious food. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I hear you on that. And it's a decision that you
Yes.
have to make. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you noticed in the different countries that you have lived in and worked in, have you noticed different approaches to perimenopause or menopause in those different locations?
Well, we've lived in Asia and Southeast Asia for 11 years. These cultures are far more quiet and far more reserved about talking about it. They're not nearly as open. Indonesians seem to be a little bit more open, and I'm not sure why. Um, Korea, I didn't know what I know now. So I can't quite fully give a fair assessment. But in general, that culture is pretty reserved and keeps to themselves about their health, and especially periods, anything around menstrual cycle. And that goes for Hong Kong too, especially. I would say it's extremely taboo to talk about, but also in the US, it feels the same way. It's just in a different way. And I can't quite pinpoint. I think in the US, if you find somebody that you can talk with, then you can be more open. But I don't feel like people in Hong Kong or Korea, I don't feel like they even seek those people out. They just kind
Huh.
of keep to themselves altogether. Yeah, nothing scientific, just all
Yeah,
observation.
observation. I just wonder because we also know that perimenopause has different impacts in different ethnic groups, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I was just wondering
Yeah.
if there's even knowledge around that, right? That
There
we know
is.
yeah,
Yeah, no, there is. And from symptomology to the way in which they manifest certain disease processes. So I think diabetes is more prevalent in this area of the world. Um, versus cardiovascular disease being the number one in westernized countries. It's quite fascinating actually to see how those different cultures and ethnicities, how those are impacted, how it impacts how they manifest the menopausal symptoms and the long-term disorders and
yeah,
disease processes that come with it. Yeah.
absolutely. So how are you serving women? Tell us a little bit about what you are offering to folks.
Yeah. So at Magnolia, we're nurse founded. That said, we are coaches, not in the nursing sense. We just have that nursing background. So we are a coach much like you. And we offer one on one consultations. We like to do that before they go to the doctor so that they can feel, like I said, really prepared and ready to advocate for themselves. We also support them after, should they need follow up, which most people do. So they feel like they need to kind of go through what they experience with the doctor, answer any questions, and then follow up to help support any of the lifestyle factors that they want to work on. We also give presentations. We lots of presentations in many forms that could be online or in person. And then the other thing that we're doing that is really exciting is we are a startup, by the way. And a couple of things with that. One, we were just accepted into accelerator program specifically for startups in the femtech sector. And the reason femtech is because we are building an app, and it's a one-stop shop app so that women can just go to one place. We know how busy women are. And really, this evolved because of my own personal experience and trying to navigate, like, okay, what am I supposed to do for exercise? What am I supposed to do for nutrition? What about my stress management? I want all of that into one place so that women can feel like they can navigate it super, super easy. So it will involve wearables, integration of wearables, and then telehealth capabilities. So we are networking and liaising with menopause providers, doctors, and then other adjunct health professionals, so dietitians, nutritionists, pelvic floor physical therapists, pharmacists, physical trainers, mental health specialists, so that if they feel like they need further support in any of those areas, they can get it, and they can do it through telehealth services. So it's a huge endeavor, but we're super, super excited. And we feel that it's really, really important for women to have this support. There's also going to be resources on there, of course, too, evidence-based. And yeah, we're really, really excited. This is a third week of our 8-week accelerator program, and we're getting a lot of great mentorship. And we are going to actually be putting out a survey soon so that we can see what clients really, truly want from our app. And we think we know what they want, but we also need to validate that. So hence the survey. So yeah, we're excited about what we have to offer and how we can help support women in this space.
That is very exciting. Having everything in one place is so important because it can feel like a full-time job just trying to take care of everything that you need in this time. Like last week, my entire week was taken up with appointments of like follow-ups with my naturopath, seeing my osteo, getting a mammogram. Like there were appointments every single day.
Yeah.
And yeah, and that can happen, especially when we're at the beginning of, so for me, it's the beginning of my menopause therapy journey. I'm starting that. So there is a lot that happens, but having everything that you can access in one place would
Yes.
be so helpful. Yeah.
Yes.
So thank you for doing that. Thank you for your trailblazing work. It's what I feel like our generation is here to do this, is to lead this
Yes.
work forward. So
Yes.
thank you so much for being part of this really important work.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super excited. I'm a full believer in everything happens for a reason. And I feel like my journey was tough, but it brought me to this. So we just want to make it better for women. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right.
Yes.
Thanks for being with us today.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Lisa. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Hey everyone. Thanks for joining me on this week's episode of Transforming 45. I hope you feel inspired, empowered, and ready to embrace every facet of your midlife journey. If you enjoyed our conversation, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. These actions make a world of difference in growing our podcast community. Your support helps us reach much more amazing listeners just like you. And don't forget, please share an episode you love with a friend or with your community. Sharing our stories is what helps our community grow. Keep shining your midlife magic, and I'll catch you next week.
Electricast.